So, what's an engineer know about sales? Well, let's find out. Hey, pretentious engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but welcome to your weekly one-on-one where I answer some of the internet's most challenging questions. This is a continuation on our Sales as Storytelling series, where I'm helping demystify different aspects of sales and actually making it accessible for engineers, global leaders, and entrepreneurs to build this muscle of learning how to sell the vision of the technologies we're progressing in a more personalized and contextual way. This is going to be our second video in a 9-part series. I plan on putting the majority of this out on YouTube. Some of this will go onto SKOOL in a more closed off aspect for members of that community. And the first stage of my approach to sales is all driven by empathy. So we really want to understand the world through the eyes of the person we're talking to. Some of our worst sales experiences, which we covered in the last video, are really when people don't have a good empathetic approach to us and they start talking at us and selling at us. And that's just not a scenario that we desire or anybody desires. And it never leads to good outcomes in most situations. Normally people feel coerced in those areas. So what I want to do is provide a different methodology where we're really starting with intense intellectual curiosity of what's driving an individual and doing all our pre-work on the front end to get to know them through the social footprint that people live, the digital social footprint. And then this episode, number 2, is going to be focused on uncovering their origin story. So think Batman. Well, hopefully everybody doesn't, start off as an orphan. Although most Disney movies start off with people being orphanized. We love orphans, right? As an origin story. But anyway, let's hop into it. I'm going to go to the remarkable tablet over this way and we'll get to work. So let me fix something on my screen that you can't see. So let me just click some magic buttons so that I can think more clearly. Ta-da, I can see myself and nothing changed for you. That's fine. And I'm recording, which I just double checked. I just put my son to bed and my other kids get here very much shortly. So I have to kind of move through this quickly. But what I really want to talk about today is we're trying to isolate, you know what a vector is? Y'all see Despicable Me, right? It's got magnitude and direction. Oh yeah. Okay, fine. That's weak sauce. But an origin is just where a vector starts. I'm pointing at this. So this is your origin, right where things start, and then it goes in motion. And this idea of vectors is something we're actually going to play with in a couple of these modules. Let me erase this because it's not as pretty as I want it to be. There we go. But we want to understand the individual's starting point. We're not even at their current state yet, but a lot of times you have kind of a starting point, an origin, the current state where they are today, and then you have, this is your start. This might be today, and then this is tomorrow. And you could actually think about this as vectors that are stacked, right? Vector! I have kids. Okay, I would watch those movies even if I didn't have kids. Let's get rid of all that for a minute. So when we're trying to understand an individual, we're trying to go way back without being weird. Like, tell me about all of your childhood trauma. That's not how far back we're going. But we're trying to understand kind of the root of the individual. And sometimes people leave clues in their social media presence if they've given a TED Talk or any kind of keynotes or just the way people speak. Sometimes you can tell what their come from is. And we want to find some interesting ways to capture that. And we're going to start by kind of studying me, which is fun because I'm fun. So what I want to start as our first module, and this is something I want you to do, leveraging these nice little bullet points that I'm drawing. And eventually someday you'll have a handout like a PDF or something. I don't know. There'll be a template for you to use someday, but right now you can write it on a piece of paper. And I want you to tell me your origin story and make it epic. So a lot of times we navigate, really grand challenges in our life and really terrible things, and we can still capture that story. But when I say make it epic, like if you think about your life as a story and an arc, there's probably some key moments, some defining moments you've encountered along the way. And we don't need to get all the way back like I talked about, but what are key defining moments that kind of cement your origin towards why you wanted to enter business or why you became an engineer. So what I'm going to do today is to kind of tell you my origin story of being an engineer. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit of my origin story of Japan, and then maybe even my origin story of my exit from Johnson & Johnson, because all of those are kind of the origins of these vectors that stack towards a story. And then if you kind of know these three origins, even though some are closer to my current state, we can start to figure out what questions would we have to ask to uncover that in someone's life. Or at least that's the experiment of this lesson. So let's try. So for my origin story, how far do I want to take you back? Do we want to go into Childhood Joe? Childhood Joe was, we don't need to go back that far. I can keep that off the internet. But I had a good upbringing. What we want to start with is the 1994 Honda Accord LX. Yes. Oh, for all you nerds, it was a coupe. It only had 2 doors. It was sporty. It was beautiful. It was very old and it was very loud. And I ran that car into the dirt. It was my first car. I spent, I think, $1,200 that I had saved up from a paper route over like 4 years. I didn't realize how low paper route salaries were back in the day. But anyway, bought this car. It was a beater. And I was a sophomore in high school and I was trying to change a CD because back in that day, we listened to music on CDs, which were discs that held data and a laser would read it based on the surface of kind of the CDs that were printed with, I think, an injection molding process. I'm not aware of exactly how they made those things. And then Blu-rays had tighter data packets. That's like what your PS5 and 4 used. Young people. I'm sure there's young people in our community that were alive before CDs. So anyway, CDs were great. I was trying to change. I was currently listening to Modest Mouse, a song called Dashboard. You can look it up because about midway in that song, and I can still remember the exact moment, I was approaching an intersection. The light was green. When I looked up from trying to change the CD unsuccessfully, the light was red. I was in the intersection at about 45 miles an hour, and I T-boned this beautiful, brand new, at this time, what would that be? Like a 2008 yellow Audi something. It just said Audi on it, so I knew I screwed up, right? And their car was totaled. My car was totaled. The driver came out furious. I ended up calling my mom because I was worried he was going to kill me, and my mom was geographically closer than the police. And that's kind of how I got into engineering. Now, there's some pieces missing, which let me actually touch on those as well. So basically, I had a friend who towed my car to his house. I worked for him, and he gave me a welder and said, good luck. And I worked a side job painting my neighbor's house, bought a new front end from a junkyard and a new hood, tore apart all the broken metal on my vehicle, and then reassembled it piece by piece. And there was this moment when I was trying to get the radiator installed that I had this epiphany. Like I fought with it. I put it in and out like 13 times. It was awful. The tubing was really tight and confusing. And I had this epiphany that somebody doesn't wake up one day and want to make a 1994 Honda Accord, but rather they look at, all these other subsystems are working across, and they look at all the previous 1993 Hondas and figure out what can they innovate or make better to get all these pieces to come together in a novel way. And I found that whole end-to-end process beautiful. And that was my entry into mechanical engineering. So that's the start of my origin. That's how I became a pretentious engineer. I crashed my car. Now, some of the questions we might start to ask is like, well, how the heck would you get that out of somebody? Like, what kind of questions do you have to ask to get to that? And we'll get to there in the lesson. So origin story number 2, that was how I ended up in mechanical engineering. The next kind of mini bump forward is how to end up in Johnson & Johnson. So I wasn't always like not technical. And I'm going to put this in quotes because I fundamentally reject it. But I always had an imposter syndrome that I wasn't as technical as my peers in college. I wasn't like the math and science person. I went from being like a pretty top tier student in high school to like a small fish in big pond at college. And even when I did internships, I never really felt like I belonged. So there's always this otherness I felt within the engineering spaces. And this really prevented me from feeling like I could be part of anything. So I ended up more on the academia side for a while. And then I went to a career fair, connected with a recruiter, and ended up talking with them about technology for like an hour. And then awkwardly was like, so do I give you my resume? And at that point, they kind of looked at it very critically because I was doing like TA work and stuff. And they offered me this magic co-op opportunity. at Ethicon. And thus my career at Johnson & Johnson began. I ended up going out with my wife to Cincinnati. She took a break from college as well. We were one of the only married co-ops in J&J history that I know of, which was kind of a weird flex. And then we decided to build a life there in Cincinnati. So I worked in surgical robotics for about a decade. 6 years. That's not a decade. A large portion of my career was in surgical robotics. And then I got this crazy offer to move to Japan. So then there was the front end innovation lead. Now you might be wondering, why am I going through this? It'll add up. And I moved out with Japan. I moved out to Japan in order to connect with Japanese clinicians, understand their unmet needs, and then develop new technologies on their behalf. And I kind of lived in this engineering, marketing, sales-facing hybrid pocket. Our family moved 12 times over the course of 1 year to get to Japan. That's always the origin that I normally start with when I share my story. Moved 12 moves in 1 year. And then as we get into current state, I normally lean towards and after 3 years of advancing surgical robotics in Japan, or after 10 years of advancing surgical robotics for Johnson & Johnson, I made a strategic exit in order to provide my family with stability and continuity of life in Japan. So we moved a 13th time in order to stay. So then that's the 13th move to stay. And thank you for the flexibility. Is over my head, I'm still thinking of the door opening and my kids coming home from school. And also, like, I have to pick up my son in 10 minutes. So I'm talking and teaching and also parenting. It's weird. It never shuts off. So that's kind of my origin story in a couple strange pieces, right? Car accident, going into college, not always feeling super technical, so being an oddball, landing a co-op, ending up in surgical robotics for like a decade, out to Japan, 12 moves to get there, and a 13th to stay. And the first question I want to start with as we get into praxis, which is kind of putting this into application. And even before I jump into praxis, again, make sure you do this for yourself. Think about the highlights, the big moves, the challenges, like what defined the trajectory that you're now on. Work it back for yourself, right? And now for praxis, this is going to be a long question. Let me see if I could write this. If I was encountering you, I write my notes ahead of time, so I'm just tracing. For the first time, comma, what questions would I need to ask? Stay with me, I know it's complicated. To uncover your origin story. Now, I don't have the answer to this because it's your origin story, but you may know the questions that I would need to ask you to find the pieces, right? And if we're good conversationalists, we can kind of learn how to unpack our life or break it into segments and put what I call like verbal hooks. Like when you say something, you add enough at the end that someone could pick it up and take the conversation to the next thing. I learned that from a guy, Vin, on YouTube. He's great. He's a great conversationalist. But for you, think about what questions someone would have to ask you to find those pieces of your origin story, to uncover it, whether it was as simple as where did you go to college, or how did you end up in sales, or how long have you been married, or like all these different pieces, right? Why did you decide to have 3 kids or 4 kids? Or being a good conversationalist in sales is really important. We want to be curious with kind of this lean in posture where we lean in, we're excited, enthusiastic about the individual, but then we can also kind of lean back and create space for them to expand and explore. We don't have to be driving the conversation too quickly unless we sense there's some urgency from them, right? Then we move a little faster. But if we actually have room to build relationship, this is part of building relationship. We want to know who we're working with if we're entering a partnership. And the best way to do that is to find their origin, figure out where they come from, right? Their come from. All right, so let's go into the next one. This is fun. This is more exploratory. And the reason I wanted to ask if I were encountering you is because you might know the question someone has to ask you. So then that can help you empathetically think, could I ask the same questions to someone else and would that work? And it might not. Everyone has different backgrounds, but at least it gives you a starting point as opposed to, I don't know how to talk to people. That's a bad place to start. We can get better at talking to people, right? Okay, so the next one. Oh, I forgot my fancy dot. There we go. Another long one. We might actually make this. How would the dynamics of the conversation change if you found the right questions? This is a fun one as well, right? If you actually find the right questions and you start to uncover someone's origin story, what you're going to discover is a spark. The conversation will naturally light up. People will loosen. They will become less guarded. They will become more open. You will establish trust. It might even become fun. People are interesting. If you did all the work with intense intellectual curiosity on the front end, and then you actually find one of those winning conversations or pull up something you saw and just give them a quote or ask them, hey, what were you thinking when you took this jump? Like, you went from consulting yourself for 10 years, and before that you were manager of marketing, and then boom, you jumped into president in Japan. How did you do that? That's amazing. Like, that uncovers the origin. People want to divulge more about themselves, and you build a real relationship because you genuinely seem interested in them, because hopefully, if you're genuine, you genuinely are interested in them, right? That's the main goal, like, be a decent person. Okay, so the last one, oh my God, we're gonna finish. And this tags back, how can intense intellectual curiosity help? Go back a lesson. If you missed the first video, it's not going to be right there. I'm too busy to tag my own videos. Just go on my page and find it. You could do the work. But seriously, think about how could you be more intensely curious about individuals before you connect with them, or look ahead at who's going to be at a network or a mixer. Come up with a couple questions, have a couple preconceived notions of what their come from could be, and ask enough questions to confirm if you're right or wrong, and see if the conversation lights up. Because if this all goes sideways, you never find the origin, and they genuinely don't want to keep talking to you, release. Let them go. Find someone else. Build a relationship elsewhere. Not everyone's supposed to be a customer or a client. You have to naturally weed people in and out. For those that you have this genuine connection with, run with it. And again, if you can get all the way back to this point, it gives you the words you need in the later modules to actually figure out how do we take someone forward, or even how do we take someone in a slightly different direction that's actually better for them, a path they didn't see or know before connecting. So we'll get there. Anyway, you can sip on that. See you on the next class. Thanks for being here. Keep changing the world.